Okay, now we enter part three of the symbolism of ancient Egypt. We're just looking at 12 major ones, but through the whole thing, I'm showing you a lot of other symbolism. And I think I found something out after reviewing the last clip. It cut off the last 2.5 minutes off of the last of this Bennu bird, instead of cutting out the little clip in the middle that I had wanted it to clip. So I have to watch that. Apparently, that's what's causing a lot of my clips to end a couple of minutes late. I'm trying to do a dissection out of the middle part of it and or insert something, and if you don't watch it, the timer won't change totally, and whenever it does, it takes that entire part off the end of your video. It's just something I gotta watch, and I guess it only happens on odd numbered Thursdays, but still quite a thing. So let's get in here and try to finish this off. We're looking at the Bennu bird. It's a great blue heron, but this great blue heron is signifying the phoenix, or the order of the phoenix, or the concept of the phoenix of rebirth. And you think, well, that's odd that it's so different than a phoenix, but it's really not. And it's really, you can see it probably reflected today with the idea of a stork bringing rebirth. And so it's extremely close. Different cultures, what I find is that the peacocks only really came from around India and up through there, and so all of these associations aren't exactly with a peacock. And just this one entity here has made people think, did we all cram over into the continent of Mu at one time because of something having happened, and then enveloped out of that and all these other concepts and ideas? And I don't believe so. I believe this ancient phoenix concept comes from way back when, and then that concept is taken by all these cultures into all the different areas, and they utilize it on different birds. So you'll see it as a stork, you'll see it as a heron, and then you'll see it as the peacock. But they have to adapt it to a bird that's around there. There are no peacocks in Egypt that anybody really knew about, so we'll go with that. So I've already talked about all of this, and I've been down through here. And so we'll just go back with palm trees. The phoenix Bennu bird is meant to signify a palm tree, though, too, and that goes with Phoenicians. The ancient Phoenicians called themselves Canaan, but the word Phoenicians actually means date palm tree, and so it gives you this Johnny Appleseed idea, and this perpetualness, and then again this seasonal thing that keeps coming back with these date palms at the right time of year, and to help them all out and stuff, and they see it as being an incredible boon and relate it to this. So some of the titles of the Bennu bird was he who came into being by himself and Lord of the Jubilees, and the later epithet referred to the belief that the Bennu periodically renewed itself like the sun. And so this is the rebirth idea around the Christmas or winter solstice that you see, where the sun goes 1 degree per day, reaches its lowest point at December 21st, pauses for 3 days in our Earth's wobble, and then starts to rise up again 3 days later. Its name is related to the Egyptian verb weben, which means to rise in brilliance or to shine. The pyramid text referred to a yellow wagtail as a symbol of Atum, and it may have been the original form of the Bennu bird. The Kingdom or New Kingdom artwork shows the Bennu bird as a gray heron with a long beak and 2 feathered crests, sometimes perched on a bin stone, which represents Ra, or in a willow tree, which also represents Osiris. And so now we can see that tree of rebirth and the tree of life. And recently in my other video, we showed the story of cannabis, history of cannabis, and then we show, well, I haven't put it out yet, but will now, the bush that they have there in the sacred tree of life and so on, and then that's meant to signify Osiris, and you can see the connection with that. And then that has this idea of reborn out of a tree, and of course Dumuzi is reborn out of a tree and so on. And whenever they find Osiris, his coffin had been built into a tree, that he was inside of the tree, if you'll actually look at the ancient text. So it's kind of an oddity there that it all goes together with these little ideas. But Let's go on from that Bennu bird, that phoenix that rides from the flames, and let's look at something else, animalistic, baboons. Baboons are seen as being a sacred creature to them because the baboon would actually get up first thing in the morning and praise the sun in their eyes because they would, get up and start being extremely active. In doing so, they said, well, they praise the sun and do things. It's kind of like their rooster. And so, a rooster is kind of sacred somewhat because it wakes the morning, it brings the day, it heralds the dawn. And these did the same type of thing. You can see that they show them even with human feet here pretty much, and then waist up it turns into a baboon, and you can see this scale mail armor type thing that's put around them that if you look at it, it really doesn't have their arm put into it or anything else. That is like a cowling, right? They also have more humanistic hands, but then again, apes have extremely humanistic type of hands. And so there's a lot of symbolism that you see inside of here. One thing I always pointed out is that this is the Scarab beetle sitting on top of the sun, and there's an ancient story that goes along with this where the Scarab beetle and the dung beetle actually is seen as a symbol that you can get the whole circle of life out of into ancient Egyptians. And we'll talk about that when we get to the Scarab. But if you look, it looks like the monkeys are giving a high five to the Scarab right here, right? These baboons. Right. There's other symbolism. You see the eye here that's on either side, and so it has both the sun and the moon and so on. And then this is meant to symbolize the sun. And the oddity here is it has that starfish and that five-pointed star that we've looked at a lot. And it actually shows a star as being the sun, which is amazing because it is a star. And if you think about it, in the ancient Sumerians, all the planets that they had there, they had with the star symbols. And in fact, even the sun had a star symbol. So these people kind of actually had a little bit more snap than you think. They thought they were all stars, but that one was right up on us that was helping to cause the whole thing. He was the one that was interacting upon us, and you can see how that would lead to a sun worship. That, and of course, it brings warmth, it brings light, it makes plants grow. I mean, it's it's the sun god. And so another thing that we look at and we see in here that's extremely important to all the things we've been looking at are at the top of their heads here. You'll see that rope loop that's up there on either one of them's head, and it is a perfect circle. It is exactly like the symbol that you see in Inanna and all the priests and the kings of ancient Sumeria having that loop, and that it was in effect their ancient symbolism of a crook and a flail concept, the sacred Mies. You can see even a few of the cylinder seals, them passing that to the god and stuff, and the god passing it to the kings. And so it's definitely attached onto that, and you can see that all the way through Ahura Mazda and all of these depictions with this same exact rope loop that makes a cartouche here in another way, showing you sacredness there. But if we take that cartouche and zip it down the way it's supposed to be, all of these are the same, very much so. So there's a lot of symbolism that bleeds over in both ways. Baboons were sacred and often considered a solar animal by the ancient Egyptians. The baboon is believed to be a solar animal and was admired for its intelligence and held several positions in Egyptian mythology. The baboon god Baba was worshipped in pre-dynastic times of Egypt, so even before Egypt had totally formed, and the animal named baboon could originate from that name. The name of the Old Kingdom, the baboon, was closely associated with Thoth, the god of wisdom, science, and measurement. The baboon was Thoth's sacred animal, often depicted with scribes during their work. As Thoth was the god of the moon, his baboons were often showing wearing the crescent. And you'll see in them on his boat that he had, that he didn't have a Nubian or anybody helping him out on his boat like you'd always see in some of the other ones. He always had just baboons. He seemed to prefer them over that. So they have that crescent moon on their head. Baboons carried out Thoth's duties as the god of measurement when they were portrayed at the spout of water clocks that you'll see in denoting time. And these are water clocks very similar to the Sumerian ones where they drip out over time, but and on the scales which weighed the heart of the deceased in the judgment of the dead. So they have a connection to that. Now these baboons too, they used to train them to do all kinds of things and pick fruits. And once they got them to where they were, good at their job, they knew what they were doing enough to where they didn't have to worry about it. It was kind of amazing, and that's why Horace or Thoth was said to have actually preferred them in some way, is that they caught on extremely well when he tried to compare it to domesticating the Nubians. He said that they were more difficult than the baboons, as kind of a conjecture to how tough that it was. The baboon had also several other funerary roles. For example, in the Book of the Dead, 4 baboons are described as sitting in the corners of a pool of the fire of the afterlife. One of the 4 sons of Horus, Happy, had the head of a baboon and guarded the lungs of the deceased. And you'll see this with the canoptic jars, and each one had its own certain type of thing. And what was odd is that Happy is the god of the Nile. He's a water god type situation. You'd almost think that would be exactly opposite of what you would use for the lungs, because you can drown. But people have often took the conjecture that you have to hold your breath whenever you go underwater. So this holds the breath for the god and all this type of stuff and things. You're like, okay, well, it can go that way, I guess, too. But there's a lot of conjecture that goes off of some of this symbolism and stuff and what it may have contained. And if you don't have enough connections, it does seem a little bit far-fetched and lax sometimes. Baboons were often portrayed in art with their arms raised in worship of the sun. They were also shown holding up the Ujat, a solar symbol, or showing riding the day boat of the sun god Ra. Baboons were usually depicted with their arms raised in worship to the sun and are connected to divine consciousness. And, I don't know, is that your inner monkey or something? Your inner mankey, if you will, to where you understand the primitive ways of things. But look, they don't act crazy. And if we're that far above them, then how should we act? Green jasper, human-headed scarab of Sobekemsaf II, set in gold mount bearing incised hieroglyphic text. God, I can't speak this morning. The trustees of the British Museum here, and so you can see a sacred scarab. And I'd like to denote that it does almost have a face carved on the back of it, though, but you can see this scarab. And a famous one, I guess, of these scarabs is the one that's on King Tut's amulet, and its center is a glass that's this funny yellowish green glass that only is found in the desert, where they had an ancient asteroid it hit, and it made sea glass out there. It made sand into glass itself naturally, and then they've gotten pieces of that and polished that up. So it's something somewhat sacred. The sacred beetle was an image of self-creation, since the Egyptians believed that the beetle came into being itself from a ball of dung, which in fact only served to protect the eggs and the larva. The Egyptians associated the scarab with the god Khepri, who came forth and from the earth, who they believed had rolled the sun across the sky every day. And so now we have that attachment with, Atlas, and having to push the rock up the hill all day, and the Greek test that you have after that, and a lot of concepts you can probably see with this idea of having to roll the ball. But these scarab beetles, or these dung beetles, they couldn't tell the difference between a male and a female on them, so they thought they were all males, and they didn't know how they bred or whatever. But they did this strange thing where they kept rolling the ball from the sun, and then out of nowhere this little ball would spout out a whole bunch more of these beetles out of nowhere. So it seemed magical to them, and a rebirth situation that they had, and because of that they attached it to rebirth and the way things go. And again, this is an idea of, well, I can show you a chicken and an egg, right? And I can show you this symbolism, and I can show you a sun and things like that, and rebirth ideas. And what more can I throw in there? Well, insects have rebirth too. These date palm trees rely on wasps and go through a certain phase. If they don't have it, they don't get pollinated and stuff, and so the fruits don't come. And that's the way a lot of things work in a conjunction or a symbiosis with each other. Buddha sat below a date palm, and he was enlightened, so could have a lot to do with the symbolism that we see. He was much earlier compared with the creator god Atum and was regarded as a form of the sun god. The scarab was a popular amulet as early as the Old Kingdom, which was placed with the deceased in the tomb and symbolized new life. And there's also an idea, too, of these tomb robbing beetles that would eat bodies and stuff. And they wondered if that had something to do with it, that the birds would eat your body and take it up into the sky. And so perhaps these beetles that they have that are starting to try to eat the old carcasses and stuff might also have something to do with it, and symbolizing taking the pieces of life or your ka, your ba, into the afterlife. From the Middle Kingdom on, scarab amulets were carved with the text with the name of a king or from the Book of the Dead and placed between the mummy's bandages, calling on the heart not to testify against its owner. So this was a helpful trick in going into the afterlife, that this would ensure that you're going to make it. They had this extra symbol that they thought if they put it on there, then that would definitely show that they had been protected. Eyes of Horus, things along those lines. Pharaoh Amenhotep III of the 18th dynasty had a collection of scarabs made with text recording important events. So the scarabs were used quite a bit also to denote this same type of rebirthing concept, and you see it a lot. A lot of times it was associated with Isis and so on, and if you remember the old TV show that they had where the girl that was very much a Wonder Woman situation where, oh mighty Isis, and she would turn into Isis and do the type of things that were very much a Wonder Womanish type of concept, and that of course all attaches together too. So that ends our series on this here, talking about different types of symbology and things that go along with ancient Egypt. And it shows you that there's a depth to it, with just colors being used of people and skin and things, but also in sacred colors to denote certain things. The desert being more of a red color, and a lot of things that blend in. They only had like 6 colors going on back then, but they still utilized them in ways that show symbolism. And then from animals to insects to common used objects to rare things to stuff that is really mythological, all put together into a symbology that you see that kind of shows you the depth. You know, guys, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. We have another video coming shortly. Peace.